Good morning from Vancouver, Canada. My name is Svetlana Kuminko, and I'm a co-founder of the Maple Hope Foundation. It is a privilege to welcome you today. At Maple Hope Foundation, we lead the National Mental Health Initiative, Healing the Wounds of the War Together, supporting women and children who have fled the war. Since last summer, we have also extended our support to grieving women in Ukraine, where the pain of violent and unjust loss is deeply felt. In response, we launched the global campaign, Heal a Mother's Heart, to shine a light on this grief, raise vital funds for bereavement support, and equip both professionals and communities with the tools to understand and navigate loss. We are truly honored to host our first international webinar today with two inspiring voices in the field, Dr. Gabor Maté from Canada and Marta Torsheim from Norway. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Natalia Stepanuk, our Community Engagement Director in Ottawa, who will guide us into today's conversation and introduce our presenters.
Thank you so much, Svetlana, and a warm welcome to everyone. I'm so glad we're able to offer this much needed conversation to our community. As you know, today we'll explore how individuals and communities can better cope with grief, deal with trauma, and support each other even when the war is still ongoing. And we could not do it in a better company. We are absolutely thrilled and deeply grateful to have two exceptional guests with us today, Dr. Gabor Maté and Marta Torsheim. Before I get started and introduce our guests, I would like to cover a few quick housekeeping notes just to make sure that everything goes well. As you may have noticed, this session has been recorded. It will be posted publicly and translated into Ukrainian so that we can share it with more mental health practitioners and the wider audience in Ukraine. There will be an opportunity to ask questions during the event. So if something comes up for you, please click the raise hand button in Zoom, and I will invite you to ask your question during the live Q&A. You'll notice that you're muted and your cameras are off. This is just so that you can relax and focus on the conversation. We will be able to unmute you during the Q&A, but your cameras will remain off. All right, with this out of the way, it is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished guests. First, Dr. Gabor Maté. He's a retired Canadian physician, globally acclaimed public speaker, and the best-selling author published internationally in multiple languages. For 2 decades, he worked as a family doctor and palliative care director. He also worked in Vancouver's downtown east side for 12 years, caring for the patients challenged by hardcore addiction, mental illness, and HIV. Throughout his work, he's explored the intricate connection between trauma, illness, and healing. His books, including In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts and the recent international bestseller, The Myth of Normal, have profoundly impacted how we understand the mind-body relationship and the role of trauma in our lives. I'm glad to mention that 3 of his books have been translated into Ukrainian, and that includes the book When the Body Says No, Hold On to Your Kids, co-authored with Gordon Neufeld, and Scattered Minds, The Origins and Healing of Attention Deficit Disorder. He's been honored with the Order of Canada and other countless awards for his groundbreaking contributions to medicine and his writings. We are truly privileged to have you with us, Dr. Maté. Joining him today is Marta Torsheim. Marta brings over 25 years of experience in psychotherapy and trauma therapy. She has studied different types of therapy in Norway and the US and founded the Institute for Trauma Work in Norway and the Norwegian Trauma Therapist Association. She has been a driving force behind the development and teaching of identity-oriented psychotraumatology worldwide. Marta has trained and collaborated with renowned figures in the field and played a leading role in bringing key works to the new audiences in Norway and beyond. Among other things, she is a co-author of Dr. Rupert's books and has been responsible for the professional editing of 7 of his books, along with her other writing contributions. Her commitment to deep, compassionate healing work has helped shape the international conversation on trauma recovery. Thank you both so much for being here today with the Ukrainian community. And on this note, I'd like to transfer it over to you, Dr. Maté. Thanks.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to the Maple Leaf Foundation for organizing me, the Maple Hope Foundation for inviting me, and all of you for joining us. I'll make a very brief remarks because I like to engage with my friend Marta for a while. Marta and I were talking a few days ago, and she graciously agreed to join me in this webinar for reasons that you will understand very, very quickly. I live here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, a very peaceful place. Last night we had a tragedy here. There was a festival of Filipino immigrants or Filipino community in Vancouver. Some person, sounds like mentally disturbed, drove a truck into the middle of the crowd, killed 9 people, and many more were injured. So there's deep grief in Vancouver right now, and especially, but not exclusively, in the Filipino community at this unpredictable and random and horrific act of violence. But here's a situation where the whole country will come together to support that community, and it'll be not repeated. It was one of those random events. In other parts of the world, including in Ukraine, such deaths are daily occurrences, and they're not random. They come as a result of political decisions that people make and an ongoing conflict. When I was in Palestine 3 years ago, um, I was told that this is before the current Gaza war broke out. I was told that there's no post-traumatic stress disorder here because the trauma is never post, the trauma is ongoing. And I can't help but that think that the same situation is true in Ukraine as well. So that it's one thing to have something terrible happen in the midst of an otherwise stable existence. It's quite another to have daily grief. And I know that just this past week, civilians, let alone soldiers, but civilians in Ukraine have been killed by bombs and drone attacks. And this has been happening over time, seems to have escalated in the last few weeks. So that not only are people having to deal with grief on the individual or on the family level, but it's also on a national level, and it's amidst an ongoing conflict that at this point seems to have no defined end. So the question becomes, how do you even handle and deal with grief when grief is being generated every day? And you can look forward to it being generated for a long time yet, or at least we don't know when it'll stop. It's a tough situation. I really don't know that I'm adequate to the task of addressing it, but this is the intent of our webinar today. Now, I'm going to introduce my friend Marta. Marta and I have worked together for quite some years. She's come to Vancouver. I've been to Oslo. And Marta is a practitioner of many modalities, but chief amongst them is identity-oriented psychotrauma therapy and treatment as developed by a German colleague of ours, Dr. Franz Rupert. And so Marta deals with grief in her professional work, grief being, as I'll say later, one of the sources of many pathologies of the emotions. But Marta has also experienced grief herself. Her adult son died, I think, 3 years ago. And so she very tragically, is not only professionally trained to address the issue of grief, she's also been through it herself. And so she's, again, very kindly agreed to be interviewed by me and to say some words. So Marta, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for the chance to be here. And thank you to Maple Hope Foundation for the great work you are doing.
So Marta, if that's okay, I'll ask you about your personal experience first.
Yes.
You know what? Let me ask you something else first. What did you understand about grief before your son died? And did that change after your loss?
Yes, it has changed. I think what has mostly changed, at least so far, is how it affects not only psychologically but also physiologically. This how deep it affects physiologically the pain, and I think maybe that's the what I've learned so far. And that grief is coming in waves. I didn't know that from before, but to experience it myself has been, quite a experience. Yeah.
And, your son died 3 years ago. Your son died,
Yes.
yeah,
He did.
suddenly.
Yeah, he was he was on holiday. He was traveling Asia,
Yeah.
and we lost contact with him while he was in Cambodia. We knew he had been sick from food poisoning, but nothing serious in a way, you know. This goes over. But then we lost contact with him, and we had to, we involved the embassy and the authorities, and he was found dead. And that took some days. And then it took a long time until we know what he died from, which was heart attack. And then it was again, which was a very, very hard time. The time from knowing that he was dead and until we could get him home, because he was in Cambodia, as far away, a country with different political structures than Norway. So it took about 8-10 weeks until we got him back. And this was a very hard time for me, his mother, for his father, and for his two siblings. He had two siblings, one 16, one 18. So it was all, of course, absolutely unexpected. So it was also a shock. But yes.
I'm so sorry, first of all, again. If you can possibly remember, this is a difficult question, but what did you understand about grief before you experienced it yourself?
What did I understand? I have lost parents, I've lost my sister, so from that losses and from the theory, I knew that it's painful. The grief comes in waves.
Yes.
Grief is like the depth of the grief is like the depth of the love. I knew this, but I couldn't imagine, really, I could not imagine the pain of losing a child. And even now, when I talk about it 3 years after, and I've talked about this many times, I start crying
Yeah.
And this, I think this is how it is. And I don't know if this will last for a lifetime or not. I don't know. But I know that it is, I think, at the moment, I think it will be there always.
Yeah.
And it is important not to suppress the emotions when they are coming, but let them come. Yeah.
You talk about pain, physical pain, yes?
Yes, psychological pain and physical pain. And the physical pain is that was the worst the first year after the loss.
Where did
It
you
was
where,
immense pain.
where did you experience that pain?
I could say in all my body. It was, if I hadn't known better, I knew that pain is, that grief is also physiological. So I knew it was the pain from the loss, but otherwise I would have been thinking I had become seriously ill.
See.
Yeah.
Now, from the point of view of identity-oriented psychotrauma therapy, you must have dealt with grief before.
Yes, 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 but this was mine, you know.
I,
Yeah.
I understand. From the point of view of the therapy that you and Franz Rupert have developed and worked with, how would you treat grief? How did you treat grief? How did you handle it? How did you approach it? And by the way,
Yeah.
you have students in Ukraine, right?
Yes,
You have Ukrainian students. Um,
yes.
so how did you approach grief from the therapeutic point of view prior to your own experience with it?
Prior to my own. Yeah.
Yeah,
Before
before,
this,
yeah. So from the point of view of the therapy that you practice, the identity-oriented, how did you approach grief?
yeah, you know, when we work with IOPT in the therapy, the person who wants to work on if it's grief or another topic, they state an intention,
Yes,
and we work with what is coming up through this intention. Like we are exploring this intention together with them and compassionate supporting them in this exploring. Yeah.
and when grief comes up in that therapy,
Mm.
what's what do you hope for? Like when people deal with grief, what is your anticipated or hope for resolution of the grief? Or maybe resolution is not the right word, but what do you hope will come from that therapy for people?
That life should be easier, and also that physiological effect could be less than if the grief is not worked with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some
But
of
you
it.
don't,
Yeah.
but you don't expect ever to go away, do you?
No, no, no. I don't think grief goes away. It just changes. I think it's lifelong. I think it's lifelong, and
Yeah.
it's I think it's lifelong, and it changes over time, and it comes in waves. And I think this is natural for human beings.
Now, in your work with your Ukrainian students,
Mm.
has grief come up at all in that work?
Now it's only been students, psychology students working as psychologists
Yeah.
who want to learn the methodology.
Right.
So I don't remember. Not no one of them has lost
I see.
anyone close. It's more they had to leave their country. Some of them are living as refugees.
I see.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
And this is an audience. I imagine some of them are therapists and psychologists. What would they may not work with IOTP. Many of them, I'm sure, don't. They don't work with my methods either. What would you want people in general, or professionals or helpers, to understand about grief, and what would you advise them to do as to how to help their communities with grief? This is again a grief that's ongoing, and there seems to be no end. What would you tell people?
Mm.
I mean, that's a tough question because I don't know what the answer is, but I'm curious what your answer might be.
Yeah, but the answer is exactly what you ask. It's ongoing, it's lifelong,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it's important to be compassionate about oneself. That this is how it is. This is reality, and stay with the emotions. Go with the emotions when they are coming. Not trying to suppress. Just let them come. Let them be. To grieve is a healthy emotion,
Hmm.
and to suppress it, to survive, is unhealthy. It may take us into depression even. Yeah.
You might be aware, but the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, in its latest edition a couple of years ago, included
Mhm.
pathological grief as a mental illness category when the grief goes on for too long. Did you hear about that?
No, but this is nonsense. Sorry
Right.
to say, but it is. Yeah.
Well, the whole DSM is nonsense, but
What did you say, Gabor?
I said the whole DSM is nonsense.
Yeah.
The,
Mm. Yeah,
yeah.
but this is not true. Mm. Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
Well, thank
Mm.
you. Um, Anything else you want to say about grief?
I have been, well, since you asked me on Wednesday evening,
Yeah.
I've been thinking of this importance of supporting mothers and, of course, also fathers who have lost their loved ones. And I was thinking of the children losing fathers, even mothers, siblings, um, and how we could support mothers and fathers to also support their children who also is grieving, because we know how loyal children are to parents. So maybe just talk to them about how that the grief, the anger at the aggressor, everything, this is natural, to support them in the emotions they have.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you. Martha agreed to be with us for about half an hour. I thought this would be a good opportunity for anybody on the call. I mean, I will continue with the webinar after Martha is complete here. But I thought this would be an opportunity for anybody on the call who wishes to ask Martha a question based on what you've heard, to raise your hand now, and we'll take your question, and I'm sure Martha will do her best to respond. So any questions for Martha before she leaves us? Okay. And Svetlana, are you going to recognize the people with the questions, or should I? How do you want to do this?
I can take care of that. I see we have a question from Barbara,
Okay.
and she's been unmuted, so please go ahead, Barbara.
Yes, thank you both for having this and for everybody affiliated. I have a question about estrangement, since my son hasn't spoken to me, nor his sister, and he's 45, for 5 years. And it's an ambiguous loss, but nevertheless, I am grieving every single day.
Mm. 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 So this is he doesn't want to speak to you.
Nothing. Blocked me through social media, everything, he and his wife, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm also grieving the loss of my neighbor who's 8 years old, who died at the beginning of the pandemic. And those two have touched my heart, obviously, very much.
Mm.
Thank you for your input, both of you.
Yeah, you know, Barbara, it's impossible for me to say what has come in between you and your son so that he has withdrawn from you. But I would suggest you do an intention to explore what is between the two of us so that you can be clear on if there is anything from your side that could be done. And also to, if it's not possible to reach him, to in the line to heal the in a way loss, even if he is alive. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what has become in between you. So,
I'm
but
sure
I
that
would.
I'm sure that you're experiencing, Barbara, some form of grief because it's like a loss. It's like a death of a relationship. I'm sure that's happening for you. Um, it's not exactly what we're addressing here today, but there's that grief aspect to it, to your experience, I'm sure. Like Martha, I would say these things don't happen out of the blue. They don't happen accidentally. Something has occurred here. I have spent a long time studying adult-child relationships, parents and adult-children relationships. In fact, it's a new book I'm writing with my son. What I can tell you, and I can't go into it with you here, something happened in your history with your son way back. Maybe when he was very small. Something happened. And like Martha, I would encourage you to get help to try to sort out what may have happened, what might be happening for you, because the child's natural desire is to unite with the parent. And so something has occurred to put a block there. And I'm not saying this to blame you or to say it's your fault. I'm sure you did your best, but something happened. And maybe if you put your attention on what may have happened and try to sort it out, there might be an opening. There might not be. I don't know. If there's no opening, then you have to go through a grief process that you have lost that you lost something very precious to you. And you may need help to deal with that grief. I think that's what we would say to you. And thank you for the question. Any, uh,
Yeah.
any other questions for Marta, please?
We do have a few questions in the queue, so I'll invite Natalia Chorna to ask hers, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you
Hi.
so much for this webinar. It's amazing. I am a therapist by myself, and I would like to ask Marta if there are any the most effective interventions which you use with clients to help them in grief, if any, like general one or two, like you use to make them feel better in a moment. Of course, it comes in waves, right? And
Yeah, as I've told you, the way we work in IOPT is to explore the intention of the client and then to be compassionate to support the client in her or his exploration. And the intervention is more or less only compassionate supporting in what is here, what is in this intention, what is in this client's psyche, what is the grief about, and support the emotions to come up. This is what we do, and yeah, that's all.
And I think no matter what the form of therapy, Marta practices IOTP. I do something called compassionate inquiry, but the themes are very similar. You have to work with the client's intention, not have your own agenda, but to work with the client's intention, and then to hold whatever arises compassionately. So I think
Yeah.
those are the key, is work with the client's intention and be curious, ask the right questions, and then whatever arises, you hold it compassionately. I think that's the essential theme here.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be respectful of your time. Marta, is it okay to take one more question from Svetlana before you leave
It's
us?
okay for me, yes.
Okay, Svetlana, please go ahead.
I have a question about the family system that affected by grief. And in our work in Ukraine, we have young mothers that lost their oldest sons or daughters at war. And there are still remaining younger children in the family. What would be your advice? Who should get support and help in the first place? Because it's obvious that to prevent intergenerational trauma, we have to address the family system as a whole. So what would be your advice?
Yeah, like 15 years ago, I worked with family systems therapy, but I stopped that, not stopped in a way, but the psychotherapy I'm in now has evolved from that and much more into compassionate work with the individual. And of course, if it's someone that is support person for the family, for the children, they can bring an intention in how can we support these children the best way, but develop compassionate, supportive stance in a way. When if you said the whole family could be lost. Did you say that?
No, we do have a lot of examples where, for example, a couple days in Kyiv where a middle son and parents got killed, and a few siblings alive in a difficult medical condition, injured but alive. I'm more talking about a situation where a mother who is only like 42 years old lost her oldest son, and she has younger children, and she's not emotionally available because she's grieving, right? So how would you heal that whole system that she can come out from her black tunnel? And you've been in a maybe not similar situation, but you said that your oldest son died and two other alive. How did you go through grief with them? Did you help them, or maybe somebody from outside help to navigate the whole family in grief?
No, what I did is I worked with my trauma, my loss, my pain, as I'm still doing, and I was there to support the boys and talk to them. And most of all, I was supportive, compassionate, and yeah. So but it is that Gabor is also so occupied with the compassion and the support, and not so much interventions, more support and compassion. And this is so important if it's children or grown-ups. And when individuals are healing, it's also healing for the system, the family system. So if the mother is not available at the moment, maybe there is a grandmother or a grandfather or anyone else in the extended family that can be supportive for the children. and maybe also for the mother. We also need extended families or extended close friends in grieving. Yeah.
Thank you, Marta. Before you go, I just make this comment to augment what you just said. Part of the problem in modern society is that we've lost our evolutionary origins, and we evolved in clans and in groups where children had multiple adult attachments to uncles and aunts and cousins and grandparents and so on. So if there was a loss of the parents, the child is already held by the whole community. And until a few thousand years ago, well, human beings that have been on the earth for millions of years, our own species has been here for 200,000 years, and until about 15,000 years ago, until like 5 minutes ago, we all lived in small band hunter-gatherer groups where the loss of one particular attachment figure didn't mean the loss of attachments because the child was already connected to a whole lot of other adults, or adults were connected to each other. And so what we're facing now is the increasing isolation of families and parents. And what Marta was referring to is bringing in the extended family and the community. We evolved with that community intact. And these communities used to have rituals for grief, but certainly supporting all the people who lost somebody. And part of the problem in modern society is the loss of this larger, small community and the extended family. So when Marta's talking about bringing in the extended family, the grandparents, whoever, she's really referring to how human beings evolved for millions of years, and and what we've lost in modern society. Marta, my dear friend, thank you so much for agreeing to do this on short notice.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me, and all the best to all of you. I wish you all the best in every manner. Bye bye.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much, Marta.
And thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thank you to Marta. I will make some preliminary remarks on what I understand about grief, and then we'll just open it up for questions. Again, to be honest, when Natalia and Svetlana first asked me to participate in this webinar, I really had my doubts that I have much to contribute, and I still have some doubts because I don't live in a situation where I'm facing what you're facing in Ukraine, because you're facing an ongoing trauma and ongoing uncertainty. So not only are you dealing with grief in a very palpable, concrete level, but you're also working with a lot of ongoing trauma and uncertainty and fear. And I'm not in that situation personally. The closest I've come to it in my work has been my work with Palestinians. When I was there, as I mentioned, 3 years ago, it was before this terrible conflict in Gaza. And since this conflict has broken out, I've worked with Palestinian therapists. And again, it's an ongoing trauma that they're facing, just as you are. So I'm just saying that although my intellectual understanding may be there, but the emotional experience that you're going through, I'm only doing that secondhand from a long distance. So that's my limitation here. Having said that, I'll tell you what I understand about grief. So human beings are wired by evolution for many emotions. We're actually wired for them. These are called primary emotions, which means that we share them with other mammals. So actually, just as human beings have certain evolutionary dictated emotional dynamics, so do other mammals. Now, human beings, they're much more complex and obviously um, affected by our intellectual capacities, but nevertheless, they're there, and we share them with other mammals. And it turns out that the emotions that we're wired for include anger, which is essential for self-protection, and curiosity, seeking, so that we can explore the world, and playfulness, which is essential for proper brain development. And it's also essential, playfulness is also essential just to get through life, because it releases different chemicals in the brain. We're also wired for fear, obviously, because without fear, we can't survive. And we're wired for grief. So grief isn't, should I say, it isn't arbitrary. It's actually part of our brain system that we should have grief. And it's very interesting to look at the evolution of the grief system. And like all these brain systems, all these emotional networks, they have evolutionary survival function. And so does grief. Now, Marta mentioned the physical pain that she has experienced in response to the loss of her son, to her grief. It turns out that it appears that the grief system evolved out of the physical pain system. So that there's a real relationship between physical pain and emotional grief. That's the first point. Second point is when you do brain scans with people experiencing different emotions, by far the most powerful is grief. In other words, the grief lights up the brain like no other emotion on brain scans. That's how deep it is, and that's how essential it is. That's the second point. The third point is that if you do brain scans, and I know I'm getting a bit technical here, but there's a reason for it. When you do brain scans on people with grief, on adults, the same part of the brain lights up as if you do brain scans on animals who are separated, little animals who are separated from their mothers. So the grief system seems to have its origin in the physical pain system and also in the distress of the infant separated from mother. And that makes sense because grief is all about separation. And the little animal who is separated from mother will vocalize distress and be in a panic. And that's good. That's evolutionarily essential because the panic will make the little animal cry. And I'm talking here about the information gathered by a wonderful, I think Estonian born, but American neuroscientist called Dr. Jaak Panksepp. And I believe he was born in somewhere in the Baltics, I think perhaps Estonia. And Dr. Panksepp's got this wonderful book called The Archaeology of the Mind, and he's got a whole chapter on grief. And he studied the neurobiology of all these emotions. And he points out that the grief system in adults has got its origin in the same system as what young creatures experience when they're separated from their mothers. So grief is all about loss and the early loss. And people who experience that early loss early in their lives are more likely to be prone for depression and all kinds of other mental pathology. Now, the task for us working with people with grief later on is to make sure, if we possibly can, that that doesn't turn into mental pathology, because it can result in prolonged depression. That's the next point. Another point is, you mentioned the relationship between grief and and pain, physical pain. Well, it turns out that the same part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, you don't have to remember this, but the same part of the brain that experiences the suffering of physical pain also experiences the suffering of emotional pain. So physical pain and emotional pain are different, but the suffering aspect is experienced in the same part of the brain. Now, that part of the brain has many receptors for opiates. Opiates are the body's own natural opium-like substances whose main job, not their only job, but main job is pain relief. And opiates are very connected to the body's and brain's caring system. So as Dr. Paxa points out, we're also wired for caring for each other. And of course we are, because without that caring, the human being doesn't survive. If we didn't care for each other, infants wouldn't survive. In fact, infants who, and we know this from unfortunate life experience, infants who are physically cared for, but not emotionally cared for, languish and they don't thrive, they may even die. So caring, that connection with nurturing others, is essential for infant life and for human life, emotional caring, emotional nurturing. And the chemicals that care releases in the brain are the opioids, are the body's own natural opium-like painkilling substances. So care actually mitigates grief, not just emotionally, but on a very physiological level. What does that mean? It means that, and this is maybe obvious, but it means that the way to help people with their grief is to care for them. Now, cultures, traditional cultures, anywhere in the world, indigenous cultures, have grieving rituals. So they'll be chanting and dancing and drumming, calling upon the spirits, but there'll be some communal activity around grief in indigenous cultures. The Mexicans have the so-called Day of the Dead, where families gather in the cemeteries, by the graveyards, by the gravestones of the lost ones, and they have picnics and celebrations and music. This is a grieving ritual. It's ongoing. They do it every year. In Jewish tradition, there's the ritual of Shiva, where after the funeral for several days, people gather at the home of the deceased one and they bring food and they tell stories about the deceased, or they tell jokes, or they just talk, but they come together and they bring food to the family. In Palestinian, and unfortunately, we've seen this far too much if you watch social media. When they lose somebody, there's this communal grieving and crying and keening. People putting their hands on the coffin. In Irish tradition, there's the same. Women will actually come and keen, cry professionally, keening, this crying, singing, chanting, so that grieving rituals are communal ones. They're associated with music very often and or vocalizing, but what they consist of is the community coming together. And again, the caring when the caring system gets activated in the person who's grieving, then the love chemicals that alleviate or mitigate grief are released, and on a physiological level, the pain is mitigated, alleviated, lessened. So, to echo what Marta says, what's needed, it's not a question of sophisticated psychotherapy at this point. What's needed is that people should be held, not to be told things like, you'll get over it, not to be told like, it'll be fine, not to be encouraged, but to just to be held with whatever they are actually experiencing. Now, unresolved grief can have serious consequences. I can think of two medical studies, and I mentioned them in my book, Myth of Normal, which has also been translated into Ukrainian. And one study showed that in Denmark, parents who lost a child have doubled the risk of multiple sclerosis. So unresolved grief can actually affect the immune system. And in the case of multiple sclerosis, the immune system turns against the body. In another study, this time out of Israel, it showed that adult parents who have cancer, if they experience the loss of a son in war or say an accident, they're more likely to die sooner of their cancer, or their cancer will get worse as a result of the unresolved grief. I don't think it's a result of grief itself. I think it's a result of unresolved grief. Because we are meant to have grief, and grief is deeply connected to the caring system. In other words, grief and love are inseparable. If we didn't care, in other words, if we didn't experience love, we would not experience grief. So grief is a measure of love, and the two are inseparable. And in psychotherapy in general, a lot of the problem is that people experience deep loss in childhood, but they never grieved it. And the grief gets stuck in the body, and it shows up in all kinds of ways. So it's really important to process grief when it's present. In the acute situation, it needs to be held compassionately. And whether it's in the church, if the churches are functioning and are a focus of the community, they could be beautiful places to process grief. In schools, in any communal institutions, as Marta said, in the extended families, what needs to happen, the grief needs to be allowed. And why do we have grief? Well, the Buddha said 2,500 years ago that life is suffering. He said birth is suffering, death is suffering. The loss of what's close to us is suffering. And grief is a way of coming to terms with loss, because we're going to experience loss. From childhood onwards, a best friend may move away, or your dog may die, or your grandfather might die, or somebody might not want to play with you. Those are all losses, and the child is experiencing grief. And ultimately, the purpose of grief, the evolutionary purpose of grief, is to accept that you've lost something and it's not coming back. You've lost something and it's not coming back. If we can't accept that it's not coming back, we'll be rigidly frustrated all the time. And I can tell you about my own personal experience. I had a therapy session earlier this week, and as some of you might know if you read my books, I was born a Jewish infant in the Second World War in 1944. And in December of that year, when I was 11 months of age, my mother had to give me to a stranger to save my life. And I didn't see her for 6 weeks. And during those 6 weeks, I was cared for by my cousins and my aunt and my uncle. And I always thought that my biggest grief was the separation from my mother. Turned out that my cousin Marta, who was 12 years old, she's the one that looked after me during those 6 weeks. And recently I found her diary, her memoirs, recently. And she said, talking about me, that I was the most lovable creature in the world. And boy, did she care for me. Without going into a long story here, then I lost her because I went back to my mother, who couldn't hold me and love me the way my cousin did. She was in too much grief herself and too terrified and too much stressed. And this therapist took my hand, looked into my eyes, and she said, Gabor, I'm going to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she said, Marta, this is my cousin Marta who looked after me. Marta loved you very much, and she had to go away. And I just sobbed. Not much, but I sobbed. And it was such a relief to get in touch with that deep grief that I had never known I even had. So that was an unresolved grief. That here I am, I finally excavated at age 81. And I believe it was liberating. So the purpose of grief is to come to terms with a loss and understanding the futility that it's not going to come back. My friend Gordon Neufeld, the psychologist with whom I wrote the book Hold On to Your Kids, he said, we shall be saved in an ocean of tears. But there's all kinds of tears. There's tears of frustration. There's tears of rage. But there's also tears of futility. And futility means understanding that something is gone and there's nothing we can do to bring it back. And those are the tears of grief. We have to let people have their tears of grief. We have to support them in it. So that's my understanding of grief. And I'll stop talking here. And if there are questions, I'll do my best to respond to them. Again, recognizing that the Ukrainian people are facing an ongoing situation of grief, of loss, of threat, and of immense suffering. And that grief can be the loss of individuals, people close to you, but I imagine it's also about many Ukrainians. I think 7 or 8 million Ukrainians right now are in exile. And I'm sure that there is griefs of separation from the homeland. So you're amidst a process of grief that's ongoing. That has to be recognized and understood. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. I see we have some questions from the audience. I'd like to invite Olga to ask her question, please.
Hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Maté, thank you for your attention to the topic of trauma and grief and for sharing your knowledge today with Ukrainian community. I immigrated to Canada in 2022 with my 2 children, while my husband voluntarily joined the army. And since then, my boys, now aged 12 and 19, they have had to adjust to the new country and to the absence of their father, obviously, and also coping with the loss of their home and their close friends. And my question is, and I think a lot of solo mothers now have the same question, how can I best support them in processing this trauma and helping them heal given all they have lost? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I go back to what Marta said. She said that she helped her children by helping herself. Because if the children have the example, this is not easy to do. Easy to say, but it's not easy to do. If the children have the example of you dealing with your grief, and you'll be able to hold your grief, that's going to reassure them that they can hold their own. So I would say that your main attention needs to be on your own process. Because if you try and help them without going through your own process and without getting support for your own grief, then your best efforts, they will not work so much because energetically, they will pick up on the fact that you're trying to help them with something that you haven't resolved or dealing with yourself. So I would say that the first and most important step is what support you get and how you are able to deal with your own grief. And then, or at the same time from that position, you can ask them how they feel and support them in their feelings. And again, support them in their feelings doesn't mean reassuring them and tell them that things will be okay. That doesn't work. But just by hearing them and validating their emotions and saying, yes, of course you feel that way. So again, it's a combination of your own self-process and then allowing them free expression of what's happening for them.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Yulia Bogdanova to ask her question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Gabor, it's an honor for me to talk to you in real time. Thank you very much for agreeing to provide this webinar for Ukrainians. And thank you for sharing about your ongoing personal process in being in therapy. I'm impressed that at your age, you're still working on your personal experience, and it is impressive. My question is, like, I'm also psychotherapist, Ukrainian psychotherapist, so I see Ukrainian clients, and as you considered that I am in an ongoing process myself, even I'm in Ukraine, I'm in Canada, but still I'm ongoing process of fear, uncertainty, grief, right? And other specifics with Ukrainian clients is that in our society, mental health is stigmatized a lot. And I remember my personal journey, how embarrassing it was to accept and to acknowledge that I have my own losses, none related to death, but still losses and traumas and stuff to work on, like till the rest of my life, probably. So my biggest concern is, and my question to you, my concern is that I might harm my clients some ways. And my question is, can you think of some ways, of some things which we should avoid in therapy, considering specifics of our situation? Does it make sense? Does my question make sense to you, Gabor?
Well, I think I understand it. Let me give you an answer, Yuli, and then If it's not complete, just tell me, okay?
Okay, thank you.
I don't believe in avoiding things in therapy. I believe in dealing with whatever comes up. Now, in terms of the stigma, here's how I approach it. And the reason in all my books and in all my presentations, I talk about my own stuff is very simple. It's that I think all of us human beings are the same. We might have different experiences and different dynamics, but fundamentally in our needs, we're all the same. That's the first point. And so when I talk about my own stuff, I'm saying to other people, look, none of us are any different. There's nothing to be ashamed of. This is just human stuff. So the stigma is undeserved because what's happening for you is perfectly normal. And that's my whole point in my book, The Myth of Normal. That's the first point. The second point is I fundamentally believe, this is my fundamental belief, that there's nothing wrong with anybody. So that we're born, essentially we're born pretty perfect. That perfection is not developed. It's undeveloped perfection, but it's there. We're born for love, we're born for belonging, connection, we're born for all that stuff. And whatever we think of as mental pathology is not anything to be ashamed of, but it's a sign that something happened during development that didn't work for us. So that what I'm saying to people is that whatever you're ashamed of in yourself, your depression or your anxiety or your grief, or your difficulty paying attention, or your suspicions, whatever, these are normal responses to abnormal circumstances. And that's another reason I share about my own stuff, because I want people to see that there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just human stuff. And so, from that point of view, there's nothing to be avoided. Having said that, I don't impose on people that they should work on this and work on that or deal with this. I don't do that. But I also don't avoid whatever arises. And I'm always eager to explore with people what life experience is underneath the things that they're ashamed of, the things that they're stigmatizing in their own minds. So what I'm saying is the normality of what we call abnormality. And people have to get the message that they're really okay, that the stuff that they're dealing with is normal human stuff. So therefore, there's nothing to be avoided. That's my approach to it. I wonder if that answers your question, or is there something that you still want to add or ask?
Yeah, I thank you very much. I think that I need time to think about your answer, and but there will be no way to tell you did I get what I was hoping to get. No, thank you very much for this response.
Okay,
I'm gonna think about it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yulia. I'd like to invite Cindy Sereni.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, it's such an honor to be in this meeting with you as well, Dr. Gabor Maté. You have inspired me, first of all, to be a trauma therapist, and I'm working my way to be part of it. I have experienced loss and grief myself with my loved ones, with the one who have passed away and the one who have asymptomatic relationship, including with the trauma, the childhood trauma from loss and grief with my mother as well. But my relationship with her is getting so much better now. I have a question. So I have a couple clients who I'm actually working with who have childhood traumas and they have a lot of love-hate relationship with their family. But when it comes to the family has passed away, for example, my client have a conflict with his father and it turns out that his father passed away.
Mm.
He couldn't really experience or express the grief. Instead, he feels a bit numbness and couldn't detect what emotion he feels, both physically, emotionally, logically, and all of the trauma pattern. So I could view this part as a complex grief. And in your opinion, what do you think about a complex grief and how we can actually help those clients who actually have hidden grief in there that they cannot still share, or they cannot be vulnerable from that part yet? Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your question. This is an adult whose father died. Their relationship was unresolved, and this man whose father died cannot experience grief, cannot experience the vulnerability. Is that the question?
Yes, my client's now an adult, but he has been having a complex, no, he has been having conflict with his father, with his dad since he was young, all the way into in the present until he
Yeah,
passed away.
so he can't experience grief. Is that it?
Yes, because he has an anger issue before, and then we were working on anger management, and then that parts that happened.
No, I understand. Now, going back to what Marta said and what I said, what is the client's intention?
He's here to express emotions that he can't really process himself.
Okay, got it. Well, here's the problem. Here's what I noticed in my own practice, and not just in my own practice, even with myself. When my parents died, especially when my father died, my brothers cried. I didn't. I couldn't experience that grief, not immediately. I'm just thinking, well, what's going on here? Because I love my dad. Well, when I was born, my father was not there. He was away in forced labor. He didn't come back till I was 15 months of age. In other words, I lost him before I had him. What I noticed in adults who couldn't grieve, and I used to work in palliative care, working with dying people. And what I noticed in adults who couldn't grieve as adults the loss of their parent is because they had already lost their parent a long time before. In other words, there was some conflict, there was some disruption in that relationship when that adult was a child. And so that they had already shut themselves off to vulnerability as a way of protecting themselves. So when the decades later, their parent actually dies, there's no vulnerability because grief is a very vulnerable emotion. But there's no vulnerability because as a child, they had shut themselves off because it was too painful and was nobody there to support them. The problem is not pain. The problem is in childhood. The problem is when there's no support for it, there's no holding for it. So your client, I would suggest, suffered the loss of his father and probably the loss of his mother, emotionally speaking, when he was very small. And so he shut himself off because it's too much for the child to bear that vulnerability. So the first thing you need to do is to validate the shutting down and to tell him that your lack of vulnerability, your difficulty feeling emotion was how you survived. It's how your organism responded to a loss a long time ago that you couldn't possibly deal with. In other words, not to make the loss of vulnerability a weakness or a bad thing or a fault or a moral failure, but to validate it that this loss of vulnerability, this shutting down that you're experiencing, this saved your life when you were small. So you have to start with that, okay? To validate it. Secondly, then I would explore the childhood and say, well, what happened here? And when people experience that kind of compassion, where their defense mechanisms are validated, usually they can get underneath them. But you have to start with that. And then if you can get this person to imagine themselves as a child with the loss that they experienced, the grief may come. And if they can't imagine themselves because they shut down their emotions, say if you had a child in that situation, what would they feel? And then usually the emotions will come. So to sum this up, you validate the shutting down. You validate the invulnerability. You ask them to thank that part of themselves that shut down because that's what protected them. Good for you that you shut down. But it's not working for you anymore. So let's look at what happened, not recently when your father died, but all those years ago. Cindy, does that answer your question?
Yes, very clearly. Thank you so much, Dr. Gabor Maté.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks. We have quite a few questions in the queue, and we are quickly running out of time. So I'd like to invite Ina Tuka to ask her question, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gabor Maté, and to everyone who contributed to this opportunity. It's incredibly valuable for us Ukrainians. I would like to touch on your point of saying that many of us need to support our community remotely. Do you have any recommendations to all of us being across the globe who are going through grief ourselves, but also need to support people who are in Ukraine and are grieving? Thank you.
So are you asking Ina how to support them remotely?
Yes, yes, thank you so much.
Okay, well, here's where, I think the internet and the digital media is in many ways a very negative thing. It creates a lot of problems, but it also creates all kinds of possibilities. So, as I mentioned, I worked with Palestinians from far away. I worked with some Israelis, but mostly I worked with Palestinians. This is a webinar that we're doing remotely, and there are people, imagine, from many different places. Can you set up ongoing communities online that can come together and under your guidance or under your guidance and the guidance of your colleagues regularly process and talk about what's happening for them? Not with the intention of fixing anything, but just with the intention of hearing each other and supporting each other. Because again, that caring, I can't emphasize this strongly enough, that caring that people receive, either physically by being held or being stroked or being emotionally held, releases endorphins or the opiates and the other love chemicals like oxytocin and prolactin in the person's brain that soothes the grief apparatus. So can you provide that caring regularly, or as much as you're ready to, online with communities of 10 people, 15 people, 30 people, whoever wants to get together? And can you just do this on a regular basis? I think that's where the internet becomes a very useful tool. I hope that makes sense to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Alexander Shevchuk to ask his question, please.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Alexander.
Thank you for everything you're doing for and trying to help people, first of all. And I would like to ask, I will try to be short and clear. The question, basically, it's more for myself. So
Okay.
I have had who died in my life as well, the people I love. But after some period of grieving, I still feel that some kind of connected, that the body only died, but I still connected to the soul. And I sometimes talk to them, even they cannot respond to me like in a regular way, let's say, but I hope it's okay. But the second part of the question is, I am interested in what you said, that sometimes like we can experience lifelong suffering, which connected, like the wars or stuff can be, they can be temporary, for example, but some like generic evil, like corruption, environment destruction, and some other evil aspects which are bothering me, they stay like it's for life. It's not like they will be over tomorrow.
That's right.
So if the trauma is disconnection, so like I want a connection and caring, but I'm afraid that if I go to the groups and like to some maybe animal rights activists or like saving the planets or helping the people right now during the war, like sometimes I'm not sure that I can handle, because I will be like exposed. Maybe sometimes I feel like too much of information of like this evil I will see, and maybe it's like full-blown depression, you know, it instead of helping, I myself will become super depressed. And how to handle like this balance?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. You're asking a very important question, because it's impossible. Well, how should I say this? I have been very concerned with the Palestine situation. And I said recently that it's impossible to be a sensitive human being and have your eyes open and your heart open, and not to have your heart broken every day. And the same thing is true in the Ukraine. It's impossible to have your eyes open and your heart open and not to have your heart broken every day. It's impossible. And the larger issues that you mentioned, the climate loss, which it's like, in a certain sense, is the biggest issue of them all, because it's affecting the whole world. And if you look at the science of it, it's just getting more terrible, but we're not even paying attention to it. So if you're paying attention and you feel helpless in the face of it, it's impossible not to be overwhelmed sometimes. So what's the answer? The answer is you got to take care of yourself. Because here's the thing, Alexander, and all of us here on this call, if all of us, Natalie and Svetlana and I and you and everybody else on this call, if we worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would still not be enough. It would still be a drop in the bucket in the face of all the tragedy and all the suffering in the world. And of course, very quickly, we'd be exhausted. So you have to pay attention to yourself. You have to pay attention to your body. What can you take and what can't you take? What can you handle and what can't you handle? How much can you accept as a responsibility and what is too much for you? And you have to set the boundaries. because otherwise you get burnt out, you get depleted, as you said, you get depressed, and then, quite apart from your personal suffering, what good are you to anybody? So that self-care is as important as care for others. And that's a lesson I have to keep having to learn, is I got to take care of myself, because the demands of the world are infinite. And on all of us, the demands are infinite, but our capacities and our energies are not infinite. They're finite. We're human beings. So I don't know what you have to do to take care of yourself, Alexander, whether it's walking into nature, whether it's physical exercise, whether it's meditation, whether it's music, whether it's talking with your friends, whether it's playing, if you can play a game or whatever it is, whatever self-care looks like for you, you have to make yourself as important as the work that you're doing. And if you don't, you're going to get depleted.
Thank you so much, Gabor. And
Thank you so much.
This question touches on the question that I've been thinking about a lot, that has to do with survivor's guilt, something that we see a lot in the Ukrainian community here in Canada, you know, and the people who had to leave Ukraine for the safety. How do you navigate? Do you have any advice how to navigate survivor's guilt, you know, of not doing enough, of feeling helpless in the face of this this immense need and suffering?
Well, it's a very important question. Can I talk with you a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So here I am. I survived the Holocaust. My grandparents died in Auschwitz. Tell me that I'm guilty.
Well, you're not. I cannot tell you that,
How come?
because that was not your fault. What happened to you was not your fault.
Tell me that I'm guilty for surviving.
Well, you're not.
Okay. Why are you then? Either I'm guilty, in which case you are, or I'm not guilty, in which case you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first point. Second point is, then in 1956, as some of you might know, there was a revolution against the communist regime in Hungary, and my family left Hungary, and I grew up in Canada. Tell me that I'm guilty for leaving Hungary.
Well, again, you're not.
Why am I not?
Well, first, well, you did it for safety, and if you were a child, it wasn't even your decision, right? Like,
Well, tell me that my parents were guilty.
No, they did what they thought was best for themselves and for their
Okay.
family, given the circumstances.
Okay, so if I'm not guilty, and if my parents are not guilty, tell me why you are guilty.
Yeah, yeah. Even though, like, intellectually, you know, like the understanding is there, but emotionally there is still this feeling of helplessness, and
Oh no, then that's different.
that's different.
Helplessness is different from guilt. Okay. You know what? The fact is, we individual human beings, like again, I keep going back to Gaza. I've been speaking out about Gaza for years. Actually for many years, long before October the 7th. And since October the 7th. And in June, I've been asked to go to Poland to do a speaking tour on Palestine. Now, all the speaking that I've ever done, I've done many hours of it, have not saved a single finger of a single infant. And there's something called moral injury. Moral injury is when you watch something happen and you're helpless in the face of it. And that really hurts. A lot of you are suffering moral injury right now. You're watching something terrible And it's not that you're not doing anything, but what you're doing is never enough. And it doesn't stop the overall horror, does it? That's different from guilt. So guilt says you did something and you shouldn't have. Or guilt says you didn't do something that you should have. That's what guilt is. And I hate to tell you, some cultures are very prone to guilt. Some cultures are very prone to guilt. Now, Jewish culture is one of them. Have you heard the joke about what is Jewish Alzheimer's?
No.
You forget everything but the guilt. Okay? Now, the same thing is true of Catholicism. And Ukraine is largely a Catholic country. And I hate to say it, but in Catholicism, there's a lot of guilt. Children are often told, I mean, if you, I don't know so much about Ukrainian Catholicism, but Irish Catholicism, when you read the Irish books, children are told from an early age on that every time they do something bad, they are driving another nail into the heart of Christ, this kind of stuff. You know, so guilt is kind of built into certain cultures, but it's got nothing to do with anything anybody did wrong. It's just a belief. So what I would say is either make me guilty for surviving, make me guilty for leaving my country, or take yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
Now, the helplessness, that's genuine. I mean, it's not that you're helpless in the sense that you can't do anything, but everything you do is going to seem very small compared to the need, won't it? You know, you have to accept that. You accept you know what you have to do here, Natalia? You have to accept your humanity. You're a human being with limitations and finite resources and finite energies. And you have to accept yourself. So that guilt is really a lack of self-acceptance. It's a lack of compassion for yourself. Okay?
Thank you so much for bringing so much clarity into the questions of guilt and helplessness, and reminding us that being human comes with limitations, and the most we can do is to be compassionate towards ourselves and towards others. I'd like to perhaps close this conversation. I do see we still have a lot of questions in the queue, and I have to apologize for, the lack of time to address all of them, or more of them. But I'd like to perhaps ask a closing question around the theme of our campaign, healing a mother's heart. What would be the parting advice you could give to the mothers who are grieving in Ukraine, or for the communities that are supporting them, especially if their losses are, like compounded by a lack of closure, like missing soldiers, unconfirmed deaths, and that kind of like very heavy circumstances.
Here's where I do perceive myself as very inadequate to answer the question. Because as I said, I mean, I don't know how many deaths there have been, but there's been hundreds of thousands of deaths as far as we know.
Yeah.
It means that there are hundreds of thousands of grieving families, and mothers and parents and children and siblings, and millions. I don't know how to help people with that, except to say, feel what you're feeling, feel the pain, allow yourself to feel it, talk about it, share it with others, listen to each other, and hold each other. Those are very inadequate words in the face of a very overwhelming situation, but this is where my wisdom kind of comes to its own limitations.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Maté, for being with us today and sharing your compassion and kindness and wisdom with us. I, I can't find the words to express the gratitude I feel, and I know that the Ukrainian community is very appreciative of this as well. As I mentioned, we'll translate this webinar into Ukrainian and share it widely to support as many people and communities as we can. I also want to thank our attendees for being today with us, asking thoughtful questions, we'll be sharing the recording of this event with you as well, along with the information about the campaign organized by the Maple Hope Foundation. You're welcome to check out our website to learn more about the campaign, how to support it. You can donate, you can raise awareness. There are so many ways how we can be there for each other. We also have a special giving initiative going on. You can purchase a scarf produced in Ukraine, either as a gift to your mother or as a gift to the mother who's lost their child in Ukraine. And that would be a gesture of support to the mother and also as a way to contribute to the campaign. So on this note, I just want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for this webinar. And please take care of yourself and each other until we meet again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.